Have you ever stopped to think what makes you or your company different? Well, today's guest, Kasey Jones, has made it her mission to help others find success. Let's have ourselves a pocket sized pep talk, and we'll hear how she does it.
A Pocket Sized Pep Talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jollis.
Thought leader and growth strategy coach Kasey Jones has made it her mission to help entrepreneurs build successful, high growth businesses. Her company, A Better Jones, and you can put a .com on that if you're looking for her, assists business professionals to define the vision for their future, tap into their unique strengths, and create the fastest path towards business growth. That sounds interesting to me. Welcome to the show, Kasey.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
We all have a story, so to speak.
Mhm.
I'd love to hear yours. I'd like to hear what path you took to get to where you are right now, because it's an unusual career path.
Yeah, I took a winding path is really it. Um, so I started my career in sales, and I started my career in sales because I went to a very intellectual college where I graduated um, being very good at writing research papers, but having no actual skills and had no clue what a person could do for a living, let alone what I wanted to do. So, you know, I saw an ad, can you talk to people? And I was like, well, I could do that. And so I got into sales and did that for a while. While I was doing that, I made the transition to marketing. And I will always say I have the brain of a marketer, but the heart of a salesperson. And so I spent the next, what, now we're at probably 11 or 10 or 11 years in marketing and kind of growth strategy for startups and small businesses. I Through all of that, I've wound up doing a lot of coaching of entrepreneurs. So I've coached entrepreneurs in Bangladesh, in Lebanon, in Cuba, all over the United States, in and I've had my own business doing that for the last 4 years. And while I was doing that, I started to notice that there was something that set apart a lot of successful entrepreneurs. And what it really was is that the clients that I would work with that grew the fastest, they all had founders and executive teams that had well-known personal brands. They were well connected, they were well known in their industry, they were very active online. And I started to really dive deep into this concept of personal branding and thought leadership. And how do you do it? How do you do it well, and how do you do it authentically? I know we that is an overused word, but it's used a lot for a really important reason.
Oh, please not. Let's not ever say it's overused. I love that word. I want to tattoo that word on me. Authentic. It's
Authentic.
so important in
It's so
everything
important.
we do. So important. So I say we're allowed to over ring the bell on authenticity.
Good, because I'm super passionate about it. And so now where I really focus with entrepreneurs, business executives, also just business professionals in general, is how do you build your authority? How do you build a powerful, authentic, personal brand? And you do it in a way that it's not just fluff, but it's meaningful. It
Right.
helps you build powerful relationships. It helps you build connections, and it helps you get closer to, the goals and the vision that you have in mind for yourself.
Okay, well, we're gonna climb inside of that one.
Yeah.
Listening to the story, to sort of the run up of what you found here. I always, and I learned this as an author. I met people who want to write books and always dreamt about writing a book. I'm going to write a book, and I go, well, okay, well, what are you going to write about? They go, well, that I don't know yet. And so they're sort of like, well, now that's a very important piece. But when you speak to most authors in the end, they'll tell you, I didn't really go looking for it. It kind of found me.
Yes.
And I think that one of the things you're describing, coming from sales and marketing, which is mind-boggling to me because you know how in businesses we don't talk to the marketing people; they're weirdos, and I can only imagine what's going on in the marketing meetings when they're talking about the sales force. And here you sort of bridge both gaps, which I
Mhm.
love because my short, dirty definition has always been: listen, marketing is what gets somebody to the table.
Yep.
Sales is what happens when we pull out the chair.
Yep.
But I can't tell you how many people I consult with who say we have a sales problem. They don't have a sales problem. They have a marketing problem. They don't have anybody they're talking to. If you have more prospects than you know what to do with, and you can't close them, well, call me. That's a sales problem. But
Yes.
for you to have both those skill sets, to me, it's only logical that now you're in a very fertile position for that journey to kind of grab you, to find you. And I think you needed both of them.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. Because of that, I will tell you, I don't know anything about enterprise marketing. Okay. That is way better funded. That's about, these big fancy creative campaigns. That ain't my deal. Right. So I do more of the stuff that to me feels like that real combo of sales and marketing.
Mm.
It's so what I refer to often as relationship building at scale. So that's why I work with early stage startups. That's why I work with small businesses because they usually can't afford to just throw a bunch of ads at something and hope that that brings in leads. You've got to get way more targeted. You've got to have a much better understanding of who you're reaching out to, how you're going to go find them. And you frankly have to do a little bit more grunt work of how you go and find them and you start to build those relationships. And that kind of scrappy demand generation, that's my specialty. I love that stuff.
Well, you're the first person ever to use the word grunt on my podcast. And you're taking me back to my dad because, I remember he was a Marine.
Yeah.
And I remember as a kid, he was like, you're a grunt. And I'd say, as a kid, it sounds bad, but he's using it in a good way. I have no idea what that means. And then I learned to really love it and embrace it as just a person that's willing to roll up their sleeves
Exactly.
and do the tough work without a whole lot of fanfare. That's sort of my running definition. That's what I was sold as a kid. Let's put it that way. And so I sort of held that title high of that's right. Of course, my voice was a little higher at the time, but that's right. I'm a grunt.
Yeah.
I love that. Pardon me for cherry picking your terms, but love the fact that you threw in grunt there. And I understand it. I wanted other people too.
Yeah.
I'm going to I promise I'm going to get to entrepreneurs selfishly because I'm an entrepreneur. Uh, but I have a pretty big following and a space in career transition, people in
Mm,
career transition. About 11 years now,
yeah.
volunteering, run my own meetup called Career Network Support. And so I know that space well. And there is a form of branding that
Yeah.
should go on, frequently doesn't go on. And in fact, just as you sort of put your thumb on it, you said, the difference between kind of successful and unsuccessful businesses, entrepreneurs, probably on the branding. I think it trails them too. So could you speak to that a little bit? If we had somebody
Absolutely.
listening right now who's 2 months fighting for that next position, talk to me about branding for that audience.
Well, you want to think about your career brand, right? So you want to think about, so there's a couple of things that I always recommend when you're thinking about this branding. And I think of branding in general as it's a Venn diagram. So it is the overlap of authentically you, right? Your experience, your background, your passions, your skills, your strengths, all of these things. And that overlaps with your ideal employer, your ideal job, right? So, what are they looking for? What do they care about? What do they need? And so, how can you find this overlap between all of the skills that you have learned in your lifetime, all of the experience that you have, the perspective that you've gained, and this role that you are seeking out? And so, how can you find something where there's this natural connection? And so, what I always encourage folks to do is yes, you want to get You want to do your research. You want to deeply understand the considerations, the goals, the priorities that those hiring managers have, but you don't want to abandon the goals, the experience, and the stuff that makes you you. And so when we can find an amazing job, it's when these two things intersect, where it's this kind of perfect marriage of what makes me wonderful, what makes me great, what makes me different, and what that hiring manager is really looking for.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, in sales, and I work with a lot of Fortune 500 companies.
Mhm.
You'd be surprised how confused they are on this particular topic. And you would think, well, how did you get this big? I don't want to name drop, but Toyota might be one that comes to mind. A phenomenal company, and yet early on when I met them, I remember asking them, well, for me to sell it, I have to know what you want the customer to want.
Yeah.
And they said, well, dependability. And I went, yeah, but
Yeah.
problem is who's going to concede that? It's like a bank going, well, our best thing is we learn people's names. Well, okay, but that's your branding. I mean, who's going to go? We could care less about you, but our interest rates are nice. So you really have to kind of go a few layers deep to figure
Yes.
it out. And,
Yes. And I
yeah.
think this is what, we get into all the time of it's the whole idea of features versus benefits.
Mm,
Right? We naturally want to talk about our features. It's dependability, it's their safety rating, it's, no, no, no. What is the benefit? What does our customer get out of it? Right?
yeah,
And so instead of dependability, it's, you know, never worrying that you're not going to be that your child isn't going to get to school on time or school safe, right? It's something that is more personal and more kind of at their core. And this is also why I'm a huge advocate of if you are, well, if you're anyone, but especially if you're a salesperson or a marketer, become a student of psychology, because it makes it easier for us to be more empathetic. It makes it easier for us to understand what motivates people. And I want to be clear, like, it's emotion that motivates somebody to buy something. It's reason and facts and figures that they use to justify that decision.
right.
Emo- but that's not why they actually do. We have all bought things we shouldn't have that isn't really a smart choice. And then later on, we come back and we're like, oh, well, no, no, no. I had very logical reasons for doing this. And it's like, no, no, no. It's because you felt like a badass when you were sitting in the front seat of that car, right? It's
Right.
something that is much more personal. And so when we can get more in the mindset of our target customer or the person that we want to hire us, that's how we can figure out how to kind of meet them where they are and speak their language and do it in a way that's going to compel them to kind of take that step.
Fabulous point. Really love where you're coming from. And so I'm just going to kind of repeat a few thoughts here. One, that benefit, so many people, they'll talk about a feature and they'll say, and I'll tell you what, the most important reason why you're going to like it, because I like it for whatever reason. I could care less what you like on the menu right now. Specific value to the client. In
Yes.
other words, so there's, and actually, I don't know, kind of a corny little story, but when I was with Xerox, we used to teach something called a fab statement: features, advantages, benefits, which means
I like that.
sometimes there's a few things it does well, and those are almost the nice to haves, but don't get it lost in the need to have. Most
Mm.
important reason why I'm recommending it is you, Kasey, told me 2 minutes ago that the company was going this way and that will take care of it. Now we've sewn that feature
Yeah.
up as opposed to here's 5 or 6 things. If I hit on a good one, let me know. We wonder why we get price objections. It's doing 4 things that I don't really need it to do. You seem excited about it. So I guess that's why it costs money, more money than I wanted to spend because it's doing things I don't need. So we really kind of fumble at the 1 yard line when we
Yep.
don't understand what Kasey's saying here, which is really being in tune with that benefit, that real value to the person. And folks, if the easiest way to figure it out is listen to the
Mhm.
client because they'll tell you what they want it to do. And all you've got at that point, when the time is right, don't jump on it at that moment, is just so one, to the other in their language. And now it's going to fit like a glove.
And I think you bring up something really important. So research shows that, you know, if you, let's say you list off 5 things that you think are these great benefits to your product or to your service, if one of those doesn't really land with the person you're delivering it to, it actually lowers the perceived value of all the other 4. And so
Right.
you're better off taking the time to really understand what matters to them and then only talking about the features, advantages, benefits that are going to directly solve the problem that they said they have. When we throw everything at the wall, it actually it actually lowers the
Right.
impact that we're trying to have.
Exactly. I totally agree with you. And, you know, it's sort of sad because Xerox had this wonderful model, this fab model, and a dishwashing detergent company, which will remain nameless, actually came at Xerox with a lawsuit and said, we don't want you using this fab thing anymore. So when I
No.
wrote my first sales book, I called it a fabic statement, and it was feature, advantage, benefit, explanation, confirm, in no particular order, by the way. But that was the end of that because I just couldn't let go of that model because
Yeah.
it's so important. Not only
Yeah.
understanding what you're saying, which is the benefit, but like Toyota, for example, you could be looking at anti-lock brakes, and maybe the client is telling you most important thing on this car is safety. Well, then when we recommend it, but maybe you're thinking the client may not know, but it's also going to bring down the insurance premiums. So we package it this way. Well,
Yeah.
it's called anti-lock brakes. And the most important reason why I'm recommending it to you is because it's
Mhm.
going to give you the safety you told me you were looking for.
Yeah.
By the way, some people like it because it'll bring the insurance premiums down. Just thought I'd toss it in. Uh,
Yeah.
get toss happy, but if there's something burning a hole in your pocket and the client's missing it, okay. But change that language around so you know the most important reason is
I
this.
love that.
Some people like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't
And
confuse anybody.
the third party stories, that's always a good one. Some people say, some people like this. It's a great way to just throw it in there.
Yeah. You know, I want to go back on one point because I find it interesting. Something that I write to. Uh, my most recent book is a book called "Why People Don't Believe You." Isn't that nasty? It's the I didn't title it. It was supposed to be called "It's Not the Words, It's the Tune." The problem with that title, by the way, is whenever I walk up to somebody with a good intentions and say, Kasey, now that I've met you, I have the perfect book for you. You're going to love it. It's wonderful. And you, what is it, Rob? Well, it's why people don't believe you. So you can see that the daggone title is like a weapon, but it's a journey to just at this authenticity.
Yeah.
And so yeah, one of the reasons why we don't want to keep hearing it is because people just keep throwing it out like it's a dollar bill or something.
Yes.
So I'm curious if I were I don't have to be a job seeker. I'm an entrepreneur, but let's say I'm not an extrovert.
Yeah.
It's going to be a stretch for me, but I'm going to try. Okay, I'm not an extrovert. But I still need to meet with my clients, and I
Yeah.
everywhere I look, I see be authentic, be authentic. What would you say to somebody who clearly knows that's what they want to be,
Hmm.
understands the value of it, they're not fighting you, but in a rather monotone voice says, that's what I struggle with. How do
Yeah.
we help them?
Well, I want to be clear. I know people always find this surprising. I'm an introvert. I'm an extroverted introvert, but I'm an introvert. You put me in a room full of strangers, and I will be the one that is like the total wallflower, awkward, standing against the wall, maybe standing at the buffet table, and then slinking my way out the door so that nobody notices. So, I think the biggest thing is, look, this is a process. And you've got to just start to learn how to get more and more comfortable. One of the reasons why I am so incredibly passionate about the work of personal branding is, with no exceptions, every single client I have ever worked with, including teams, when people go through this process of figuring out, what am I really about? What do I what do I really stand for? Kind of, how do I want people to perceive me? And then starting to put themselves out there in a way that, let's be real, it is terrifying for pretty much everybody at first. You are deciding what really matters to you, and then you are over and over and over again facing your fear. You get much more confident. You get much more sure of kind of who you are and what you're all about. And let me tell you, even the most introverted people, they do this for a while and they become so much more confident and so much more comfortable in terms of connecting with strangers. And so what I really recommend is just starting and knowing that this is a practice. This is not a all of a sudden someone's going to give me a shortcut and I'm magically going to just feel really comfortable. It's something that you do with consistency. You develop this practice of connecting with others and kind of facing your fears, and it gets easier. And the one other thing I will add is you've got to always be checking in with yourself, because sometimes you'll have a conversation with someone or you'll post something online and you'll realize it didn't feel right, didn't feel good. And yeah, sometimes it didn't feel good because it was terrifying, but afterwards you're like, actually, that wasn't so bad. But sometimes it's because, I don't know, you showed up in a way that didn't feel authentic, didn't feel aligned with who you are and what you care about. And you've got to know that you're going to have this regular feedback loop of feeding it back into who you are, what you care about, how you want to be viewed, and iterating and repeating over and over again.
Really good. I just on a coaching call about an hour before we spoke now, and somebody had done something, really put themselves out there. Actually, it sounds unusual, but fairly high level position, never puts the camera on their
Mm,
Zoom calls. And I said, gotta put that camera on.
gotta put
And
it on.
right. And she put it on, and her feedback was, I was a little uncomfortable, and I knew I was going to be uncomfortable. Of course, she really talked herself up to being uncomfortable. I think we also have to shut down. I call it the bully in the brain.
Yes.
Not right now, please. But when we turned it around and I said, I mean, how about near the end? And all of a sudden, she was realizing that, listen, we have to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And how about the third time we turn the camera on? How about for you and me, the first time we talk about something we're writing about or a topic? We put ourselves out there, but believe me, folks, it's a little clunky. Uh,
Yeah.
Catch us the 10th or 12th time for me on stage, and you'll go, boy, that guy's good. Well, you should have seen the first one. The only problem is if you saw the first one, you would have never known, because I'll never tell you it's the first one. We're not going to tell people that we're uncomfortable or we don't do this well, because people will completely change their perception of you and say, well, Kasey wasn't bad considering she's an introvert or
Yeah.
whatever. So, we just get comfortable in our own skin, love your words, show up, just go. All
Mhm.
right. Promise you it's going to be twice for those people. They're not going to catch a thing. And now we've got a place to build on. Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And we all think that our nervousness or our little fumbles are so much more noticeable than they are. Let's be real. Everyone else is worrying about their own nervousness and fumbles. They're too busy focusing on themselves to pay attention to yours.
I, I agree. I wrote a piece one time called "The Pursuit of Imperfection," and
Yeah.
I really think that people can identify. Remember the word we started with, authenticity.
Yeah.
People can identify with it when it isn't perfect.
Oh,
Right. This
without a doubt.
podcaster right here will tell you, and Kasey will if you to ask her, she'll tell you. The clunkiest part for me is always the intro, because that's
Yeah.
the part I've sort of tried to write down. When we just trust our instincts, trust our track record. What usually happens? Do you fall into a pit of, or do you really kind of come out the other end and go, oh, that was a little better than I thought? Why can't that be one of our thought processes rather
Yeah.
than what would happen in one in a million chance? What would happen? Okay, let the bully in the brain push this and think about that. Doesn't help us.
No, it doesn't. And this is also one of the reasons why I'm just a huge advocate of, again, practicing. And it's not rehearsing. Okay, it's not rehearsing so that you get it perfectly. It's just putting yourself out there and doing it over and over and over again. It gets easier. You
Yeah.
get more comfortable. And it's interesting. It's, I've been creating content online for years now. P.S. It did not come naturally to me at all. It took me time to get to the point where I'm very comfortable doing it now. But in the last, maybe 6 months, 8 months, I've started creating content on TikTok. And let me tell you, going from every video I've ever done online is at least 2.5 minutes to 60 seconds. Ooh, that was a challenge. But it's the one thing that I've learned, which is fascinating to me, is if I have an idea for a video, I've got to post the first or second take that I record. Because if I do it over and over and over again until I get it absolutely perfect on the 10th take, guess what? I'll post it and it will completely fall flat. When I do one that is not perfect, but it is authentic and it is me being very, very me in the first or second take, always does better. And I've learned that that's kind of a nice little microcosm for life, is when we over rehearse things, it is obvious and it does not feel genuine and it doesn't feel as real. And when we just kind of let it flow, it might not be perfect, but people will connect much more readily and much more easily.
Such a great point. I'm smiling because I'm thinking that I can't tell you the number of times my wife will say to me, I've got to talk to this. She's an artist. I have to talk to this gallery, and they ask me this. What should I say? And I'll say, okay, bibbidi bip, bibbidi bip, bibbidi bip, bibbidi bip. And she says, oh, wait. Let me get a piece of paper. Let me write. I can never get the bibbidi bips back.
Yeah.
And it sounds almost obnoxious. I've actually never said this because it wouldn't work well in a marriage. But there is a part of me that, don't worry, she's not here right now. But there's a part of me that almost wants to say, listen, when you come up from behind and you ask me these questions,
You
just
record it.
keep a tape recorder with you, because even I'm frustrated. I'm like, I know I said it better, but I was just in the moment. Just now I'm going to go do the moment again for it.
Yes.
It just doesn't work. All right, let me put one more question on the table, push you back into entrepreneurship, because we also have a
Yeah.
lot of entrepreneurs, and your host here is always interested as well.
Yeah.
Although I'm in my 29th year, so I'm kind of coming down the home stretch here. But
Well,
how about yeah, how about one lesson, maybe the biggest lesson that you've learned, if you were sitting with an entrepreneur and said, look, you're gonna skin your knees a couple of times. But if I could go back into the Wayback Machine with Mr. Peabody, here's the one thing I tell me that that I know now. What would it be?
trust your instincts. So almost every single mistake, almost every single delay in my progress ever, and this is true of all my clients, is we wind up doing things because someone was like, you should really do this. And you think, oh, that sounds really smart and that sounds really reasonable. And then you realize your heart really wasn't in it. It wasn't really what you wanted to do, which means you're not going to do it terribly well. And you'll wind up kind of having to start all over again anyway. And I'm not saying that you don't take advice from others. I'm not saying that you don't learn from what other people are doing. But if you are trying to build a business based on someone else's idea or someone else's direction and it just doesn't quite feel right, it's not going to work.
Yeah,
Trust your instincts.
yeah, and very valuable. And that's, I'll tell you, you disclosed that you got a little introvert in you. Um, I'll disclose, and my audience knows at this point, I have what I call a little OCD-ish in me,
Mm,
and I'm a very competitive person. So your words really resonate with me, because sometimes I'll get confused between, is this my instinct talking, or
hmm.
am I quitting? Am
Yes.
I, yeah, and the quitting voice will always overpower the other one and go, this
Oh,
is
yeah.
called quitting. And so you're going to go do that makes no sense to you, that really, that your instinct tells you to avoid. And that's sort of a battle I personally
Mhm.
wage of, where's the line? And sometimes I personally have trouble finding it.
Hard. mean, it is so hard. And I think, look, honestly, when you asked me this question, I was debating between these two things. And the other thing I will say is that oftentimes we do quit too soon. So what I learned that I would do is I would try a strategy and it wouldn't work. And so I'd be like, oh, well, that strategy doesn't work. I got to try something completely different. And I realized I didn't really try. I tried frickin' once. And entrepreneurship is hard, and you've got to kind of pick a direction. You got to try it, and then it's not going to work. And you make a slight adjustment and you try it again, and it's not going to work. And you make a slight adjustment and you try it again. Eventually, you will get there. But what I would find is that I would think, oh, I really want to do this thing. And I would try it, and it wouldn't work exactly how I thought it would. And so I would just be like, oh, well, that's not going to work at all. I clearly need to do something different. And I just wrote something of are you adapting? Are you iterating? Or are you just plain quitting? And it is really hard to figure out as an entrepreneur. But yeah. What I've realized is we need to make a lot more small adjustments and a lot fewer really big ones.
Excellent. For me, one of the ways that I love that, one of the ways that I've sort of worked it through is, and it doesn't always, it's not perfect. What we're talking about, folks, there's no magic wand. It's take 2 of these and you're all set. But I show up. In other words, if the voice in my head says quit, I don't quit in bed, metaphorically speaking. In other words, that's the easy one to go, you know what, let's just not. I'll show up. And I remember I'm an open water swimmer. I remember a race that really helped crystallize this. I wasn't trained as well. I was fighting a shoulder injury, and I decided, went back and forth. I'm just not going to do it. And I went, no, you're going to show up. You're going to go to that lake. You're going to bring your wetsuit. And if you're sitting on the banks of that river and that's your decision, good. Don't swim. But don't quit in bed. Don't quit in the head. Go, and that's why when you were talking about, fix it, adapt it. Don't quit in your head. At least go and learn, and then let's find another word. Lit. I'm still struggling with the word quit, but don't quit in your head, folks. That's the bad one for me, at least.
I think that's a phenomenal way of looking at it. I love that.
Well, thank you. Now I got one in. Thanks. All right, Kasey. Wow, what I really enjoyed this, and I could tell when I met Kasey, you probably thought it was kind of cold because we got about 3 sentences, and I was like, "That's it. I don't want to talk to you anymore." In my head, because I knew, let's just have this conversation. Let it be. That word again. Authentic. But loved it. Tell me where people can find you. I want to be able to find you. I want to see that article that you were talking about. Yeah. So where do we find you?
So you can find me on any social media platform. I'm very active on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter and TikTok. My handle on everything is A Better Jones. And you can also go to abetterjones.com. And anytime, I'm always up for a conversation. So if there's anything that somebody wants to reach out and I don't know, ask me a question or go deeper into something, don't hesitate to send me a message and let's talk.
And that email address is?
Kasey, Kasey, at abetterjones.com.
Good. Okay. Well, and I'll also put that on the show notes, everyone. So if you come to the site, iTunes, wherever, you'll see that address and that website. Love the conversation. Thank you so much. I don't often say this, but I was taking notes. Normally I'm supposed to take notes on questions. I was taking notes on just things that were connecting to me in business. And I liked our little journey towards helping those that are in that transition. Anyway, I just love the conversation. Really grateful you spent some time with us. Anyway, so thank you so much. And for you out there, everyone, thank you so much for listening. Stay safe, everyone.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jollis.com.